Hello, everyone, and welcome to this case study presentation, which will be delivered by Will Wilson, the CEO of Siemens Mobility UK. I'm sure that Will has got some great things to share and say about the current times. I know that you'll also focus on Siemens Mobility's vision for the future and also give us an insight into the most important trends in rail transportation after COVID-19. Just to let the audience know that if you have any questions for Will, please do send us your questions using the questions box in the panel on your screen. And we will hold a Q&A with Will after his presentation. So that's all from me. Without further hesitation, Will, let me hand over to you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Craig. It's an honor to be here. So good afternoon, good morning, wherever you are. Today, I'm going to talk a little bit about Siemens Mobility. I am the CEO of Siemens Mobility in the UK and Ireland, which is a very significant market for us. But we have been working on a global basis. First of all, how we manage the pandemic, and more importantly, the effect it's had and will have on our business today and tomorrow. And I'm very happy to share that with you. So let me perhaps minimize this. What we need to think about is what's happened with transportation. Transportation is key in every country. And in the last 3 to 4 months, it's true to say it has adapted and it has innovated to try and cope with lower demands, but also the necessity to get key employees moved from A to B in order to keep those key essential services going. We also still have the longer term opportunities around sustainable mobility. And as a company, Siemens Mobility is absolutely committed to taking the first mile to the last mile approach. We want everything to be integrated, we want it to be seamless, and most of all, we want to make the traveling experience safe with every aspect of safety, including, of course, COVID. To talk a little bit about us as a company, our mission has not been altered by the last 3 or 4 months. We are totally focused on digitalization, and our mission statement with digitalization, we enable mobility operators worldwide to make trains and infrastructure intelligent, increase value sustainably over the life cycle, enhancing passenger experience and guaranteeing availability. The passenger, it remains the center of everything we do. We are, of course, an entrepreneurial company, and our vision statement sums that up, saying we're global entrepreneurs trusted by our partners to pioneer transportation, moving people sustainably and seamlessly from the first mile to the last. COVID has not altered the way that we as a company view the market. It hasn't altered the way that we actually interface into the end product of what we do. What it has altered is very much the way that we are dealing with our customers and with their customers. And it's pushed us to a new level, a new, very exciting level. We are quite diversified in what we do. We stem from rail infrastructure, which includes signaling, electrification, and so forth. We do a huge amount of intermodal solutions, apps, passenger interfaces, booking payments, management of data, and some of these applications have been absolutely critical over the last 3 or 4 months with certain customers. We also are aware that the concept of economic stimulus in many countries is really paramount around transportation. And we are more than happy to talk to many different customers about turnkey projects. We're one of the larger manufacturers of rolling stock, a full portfolio, from metro trains through to very high-speed trains, light rail solutions, and of course freight locomotives in particular. And we have, particularly in our rolling stock area, a huge sustainability initiative to try and give our contribution to the air quality that is now required, particularly post-COVID, when we saw the pollution levels dropping. One of the areas where we're very proud we've kept going is in our customer services area. we maintain a significant amount of rolling stock around the world. Just here in the UK, we maintain around 1/3 of all the trains that are in operation. And we have had 100% availability, 100% of our workforce, making sure that that continued right the way through. And then, not specifically rail, but we also do a lot of traffic solutions. And some of these, again, in a post-COVID environment, are going to be absolutely key. The concept of limiting the number of cars that actually can come into a city may seem a little bit alien, because at the moment, people don't want to travel on trains, they don't want to go on public transport. Everyone feels safe within their own environment of a car. The bottom line is, though, we don't have the road capacity or the parking capacity in most large conurbations in order to make that sustainable. And many mayors, many authorities are working with us to see what solutions we can come up with that we can get people back onto public transportation once we can actually show that public transportation is indeed safe. A few statistics about our company: 36,800 employees worldwide, great retention, 17,600 of those employees have worked for more than 10 years. And we still have continued our apprentices and our trainings right the way through. This year, we are continuing to bring in all our apprentices as planned. And we offer our full service in exactly the same way that we were offering it before. We, like everyone in our transportation sector, had a huge shock with this uncertainty. And it's quite interesting to see how Paris, for instance, is pushing so hard the concept of people using bikes. And indeed, within our traffic business, we've been working to prioritize the movement of pedestrians and cyclists over that of traffic, because we don't want bunching at traffic junctions. We've been really amazed at the way that passengers just have stopped totally. And some of our customers have really felt this in a very bad way. And I don't really need to tell you all that in every country, there's been a huge effect. But what have we been doing in the short term? Well, we came up, actually led by my team here in the UK, with a number of solutions. And this is about getting confidence back on the railways. In the UK alone, 85% of people said they did not want to go on public transportation, particularly trains. They viewed them as one of the most dangerous environments because they were captive and they couldn't control who else was in there. And of those that formerly commuted by rail, 95% said they did not want to go back to commuting by rail until something changed. So we've been quite innovative, working on some ultraviolet solutions with some specialist proprietary coatings, so we can actually cleanse the air. We can change all of the air within a railway carriage within about 14 minutes. And we can show that it has killed not only all the COVIDs and all the bacteria in there, but it also takes particulates and bad gases out as well. And we are pioneering this here in the UK with the operator Thameslink. And this is government backed as well. And we've also been looking at our metro users, because obviously an underground railway where you have to be in tunnels and going down escalators is even worse than perhaps a station environment. And we've been putting together plans with our major customers on how we can sustainably make travel safe. And of course, this isn't limited just to here in Europe. We're working extensively in Singapore, we're working in China, in order to bring very similar solutions, if not the same solutions, forwards on a global basis. We're also seeing a resurgence in investment. In Germany, there's been 6 billion euro in equity invested into Deutsche Bahn. In Europe, in the US, the FDA, 25 billion in grants to actually give emergency funding so that the transport operators can continue, but also to create jobs within their national markets, and to bring transportation to a new standard. And in the UK, my own market, what we've seen is a slightly different approach, in that the government effectively has brought most of the rail operators into government ownership with a guaranteed return, even though they have no revenue. And this is on a 6-month basis. And hopefully, working with those customers, we will have come up with some solutions by the end of it, whereby customers will be happy to go back on and the revenue streams will be once again flowing. But all in all, for us in looking at our market sector, COVID was most certainly not planned. We had a very, very good strategy. But COVID is actually developing some opportunities. And it's taking us in a slightly different trajectory in that we're looking very much at the customer safety, the safety of all the operators, staff, and also the sustainability of what we're doing. I mentioned already the short-term passenger drops, but we are expecting passenger numbers to recover. There's talk today about a European second wave. There's been talk in Asia about a second wave as well, and we will see what happens. But the bottom line is, for any economy to survive, we have got to actually get people traveling. And although we may not see people returning to the levels of office occupancy that they did formerly, we are certain that somewhere along the lines, people will be commuting back into conurbations. They will be doing business trips, whether it's air travel or by rail. And this is forming a lot of our revised strategy. It isn't really changed. You know, mass transit, the metros, the light rail is the backbone of urban mobility, and people will still have to travel around cities. But what we're also seeing, particularly in Germany with some recent orders, is that interurban on a train where you are able to move around and you can be more widely spaced may be preferential to short-term air travel. And particularly for trips less than 300 kilometers. And of course, if we're going to see increased congestion with cars, it does leave little alternative than to go on a train. We are very conscious, and we spend a lot of time talking about exactly which region is going to recover first, and it's very difficult to predict. We know here in Europe, there is a huge drop of ridership, and there is still very few signs that we're going to go back up, but we have seen an increase to about 20 to 30% ridership on pre-COVID basis versus what we had at the height of the pandemic, which was in some cases about 1%. I remember talking to one of my high-speed customers here in the UK that services into Paris and to Brussels and into Amsterdam. And on that day, they had run a service with only one passenger on. And they, I think you could describe it, were stoical, knowing that it would recover, but just wondering how to weather the storm when there was no revenue and government requests that we keep the borders and the train services flowing. So what we're seeing is in China, a recovery, almost back up to normal levels of travel, but of course using face masks and with other mitigations such as enhanced cleaning. Asia Pacific, a little bit further behind, particularly in India, where public transportation was actually stopped because they wanted to stop the movement of people, and we will see that coming back. The US, similarly, started to recover. We need to see exactly where they go because it varies very much state by state, city by city, and road-based mobility is in a far better position to perhaps take up the place of some public transportation in the US. And again, in Latin America, the ridership is really still rather low, but we are again, due to the nature of the population, they're expecting that they will recover fairly quickly. Come on. So how do we do it? How do we restore passenger confidence in public transportation? So we've got a couple of case studies here. This one's about Dave, who is a commuter. And before the trip, he didn't really think much about planning. He was interested in what we call mobility as a service. So he could buy one ticket that took him from his front door onto a bus, onto a tram, onto a metro, onto a train, which then did the reverse and delivered him where he was going. And contactless ticketing was even easier because it was just all on his smartphone and didn't have to worry about it. So what do we have to do today? We have to think about, well, how do we enhance that? All those things still stand, but we've got to make sure that, you know, this case study person, Dave, understands that it is creating a safe environment. To not have to have a paper ticket means you don't have to touch that ticket machine. To be able to know what the loading levels are like on your transport, whether it's a bus or train or tram, so you have the option to choose the least crowded one, is again also something that we could supply before, but is now going to become the new normal. Then when you get onto that, you know, that train, you don't really want to have to press a button on the door to open it. So you need automated door openings. We need to ensure that we can change the hard surfaces that are touched on a regular basis and put temporary coatings on there. And we've been developing a number of 3D printed solutions for this. We need to look at air cleansing, the air conditioning within the trains, and whether we add to that air conditioning in order to mean that we don't have to have such levels of social distancing and that we can actually cleanse the air. Information is absolutely critical to people feeling confident. We need to make sure that we inform them, whether it's through an app, whether it's through a notice, whether it's through a live passenger information system, exactly what's going on. And then we need to be intermodal. So, you know, we look at capacity. We don't want people really all rammed into one train. So we can look at the infrastructure side of things and how we can increase capacity without having to build extra railways. The integration with bike transportation, for instance, walk routes, and most of all, making sure that all our passengers know that they have someone that they can more or less talk to. And we believe that this, combined with our customers making the same measures, is going to instill a lot of confidence. And then another case study, Emma, with looking at the operators and, you know, how we're helping them. We do a lot of digital twins, artificial intelligence driving solutions, modeling traffic flows, modeling the occupancy, and then of course actually real-time tracking it. We look at how we can assist in accelerating the delivery of some things that our operators want, and this has included remote project execution, even remote commissioning of railways that we did at the beginning of the pandemic. We were commissioning railway in Hong Kong from Germany without actually physically going there. Automatic train operations, so there's no requirement for a driver on occasions. And then making the driver's environment very safe as well is absolutely critical. And of course, making sure we have a clean environment. I mentioned our UV-based cleaning regimes, but also remote service solutions, so we don't need to involve humans in those cleaning activities. The predictive maintenance, which means that we have the reliability because the human effort required if you have a failed unit. And then looking at how we can support our customers as well, whether it's actually buying some of their assets and leasing them back to them, or supporting them in different models of maintenance. It all goes part and parcel of what we're trying to do. We have a vision, and I talked about this a little bit as well, and this is unchanged, and our strategy is unchanged. And it's about being trusted, being the entrepreneur to our customers, our partners, and actually pushing transportation technology in a sustainable way forwards. And whether it's the short-term aspects of making sure that they're happy that we have a safe environment for their customers and we're COVID-proofing their solutions, or whether it's actually the 10, 20, 30-year view that they know that we are a trusted partner and we will react to short and long-term requirements as we have undoubtedly with this COVID pandemic. So, in conclusion, what has the pandemic done to us as a business? Well, short term, it has affected us and it's hit our revenue streams. It's given us a whole challenge into a new way of working, but it most certainly hasn't altered our business strategy. It's brought us in many cases much closer to our customers in a virtual way, but actually coming up and jointly working with them on solutions which may be specific to them or they may be generic and applicable across the world. But importantly, it's meant that we will stick exactly to our core values and we will help our customers move beyond where we are today. And what we mean by moving beyond, it's in the short term, it's about getting that confidence to get passengers back onto railways in a safe environment. And then in the medium term, it's back to our fully sustainable strategies, which this new way of working in this new environment is all part and parcel of. And I truly believe that, you know, we will have success as we move forwards. So I think that's probably enough from me. I'm, of course, always interested to know what people are thinking, and I'll hand back to you, Craig.
Thank you very much, Will. Excellent presentation there. Some fascinating things to see, especially the case studies that you gave and how COVID-19 has impacted not only the industry, but how it's been a challenge for Siemens Mobility. But of course, as that screen says, moving beyond is important. With that in mind, we've got some questions that have come through around COVID-19 from the audience. So I thought I'd just group them into one big question, and then perhaps you can elaborate on a couple of things. So as you mentioned, the challenges and the concerns that you mentioned, especially with your customers being hugely affected. The audience would like to know what's going to happen in the long term, especially with social distancing on trains and the innovative cleaning methods that you've explained. In the future, you know, will these cleaning solutions be part of everyday life? Will we phase them out at some point, or will they continue? And another point is that obviously COVID-19 was unprecedented, but have we learned enough, and are we truly prepared for future cases and second waves? What are your thoughts?
Well, it's quite interesting. I mean, the short-term challenge, you know, 4 months ago was what do we do here and now today? And that made us look at, particularly around cleaning, different ways of doing it. And, you know, there are disinfectants that we're using which will be slow release and they will last for you know, 24 to 28 days. And we've developed ways that we can spray those remotely inside trains, for instance, without any risk to humans. And there's no reason why those practices won't continue. Something like air purification to take out bacteria and to take out the risk of contracting COVID is a short-term solution, because we don't know what's going to happen with COVID, but when we look at other pandemics in the past, they've lasted up to 3 years, 4 years, and they've gone away, and then confidence has been restored. But one of the things that I've been focusing very much on is actually, what are the other benefits of some of the systems we can give? So our air purification not only takes COVIDs out, and that's how I may choose to, you know, sell it today, but it is also actually taking out pollutants. It's taking out carbon dioxide, it's taking out particulates. So this means that if you went on a train that had one of these solutions on, you know, in 5, 6, 7 years' time, you would actually be breathing purified air as opposed to the stuff that you did before. And, you know, we often forget that, you know, particularly commuters in public transportation do tend to have a very high volume of colds and flu virus and things like that. And so to have a cleaner environment there is something that is absolutely sustainable. The concept of information systems, I think that public transportation is a little bit lacking across the world sometimes in being able to talk to its customers. So I think that again is something viable. And I don't see that there's very much, if anything, perhaps, that we're doing that is so short term that you can just say it's down to COVID and it isn't sustainable.
Okay, interesting. So obviously there's the impact of COVID has been felt worldwide. But there's also a lot of questions around other topics that people want to know from Siemens Mobility. So let's move away from COVID-19 and perhaps address some other key questions and topics. So there's one here which is around sustainability and environmental issues. You mentioned about the sustainable solutions and how Siemens is moving forward with that. Do you think that, or how is Siemens Mobility working towards meeting sustainability goals and the vision of a carbon neutral rail industry before 2030?
Okay, so to start off with Siemens as a group overall, we have a similar target that as our business, the whole of Siemens, we will be carbon neutral at the very latest by 2030, but we're targeting 2028 or earlier across that. And of course, that includes Siemens Mobility. But a lot of what we're looking at as Siemens Mobility is what our contribution is to the greater carbon creation of transport, particularly around rail, but also with the traffic solutions. And we are introducing, we haven't used diesel, for instance, for many years in any of our trains. And we are probably one of the world's leading developers of battery technologies. So where you don't have existing electrification, use a diesel. If it's partially electrified, you can finish that journey with the electric train with the battery on it, which again saves the infrastructure costs of fully electrifying and also the time it takes to do those schemes. We are also, with our energy business, very advanced in the development of hydrogen, not only the development of hydrogen trains, but also other solutions such as small hydrogen plants that can actually charge up electric vehicles in a fast charge environment where there isn't sufficient grid. We work extensively, obviously, with the offshore wind electricity producers. We, with Siemens Gamesa, have produced the biggest ever wind farm in the world in the North Sea. And we continue along all these sustainable strategies. Just about everywhere I look within the Siemens Group, but within mobility, we are focusing on how to reduce carbon, even down to our, the control systems that we have coming out of our digital industries, where we're looking at very much around carbon capture and what we can do there. And actually the next generation of gas turbine, which, although not truly carbon neutral, is a long way removed from anything that we've seen before. And again, we are pioneering that forwards. So across the board, I can't go into so much detail to explain it all, but we have a huge initiative going on.
That's really good to hear. Thank you. So let's move quickly on to another topic just to get through some key things. Again, you mentioned AI-driven mobility analytics. Somebody's asking, what is your take on such technologies as VR and AI, and how much of a core part do you think that these technologies will play in the future of rail overall in general?
I think that rail perhaps is behind where other industries need to be, but we as a company have been pioneering this for a considerable length of time. If I just look at, say, some of the large infrastructure business, projects we're involved with, the whole concept of AI and digital twins, for the construction of it, for the phasing so that we don't get duplicate activities, the design so we limit the amount of concrete that, say, goes into a tunnel, and the basics of actually building the infrastructure, then couple that with AI going into the design of our trains or the design of our electrification systems or our signaling systems, and then into our manufacturing processes, and right the way through the life cycle of creating a new bit of infrastructure and then operating it. AI is absolutely complicit in the way that we're working. And in some respects, we're bringing some of our customers along with us, because the rail industry is always cautious, and transportation is as well. So actually showing the value costs of using AI over a life cycle rather than the capital of using it in the first place is how we're approaching it. And we're having a very good reception across the globe with many of our customers.
Good. And just one last question off the back of these digital technologies around cyber security, which is a huge issue. Do you think that the rail industry still lacks a great understanding of cyber security? What can the industry do? Is there any kind of help from any industry bodies that you think the rail industry still needs to kind of harness and get more understanding from?
I think the rail industry does understand cybersecurity. I think one of the opportunities but challenges is that railways are generally state-owned, and each state tends to have a slightly different interpretation on cybersecurity and how that's interpreted. So we see a basic core, we see European standards, we see standards in other countries, and of course we're always compliant with those. But the interpretation of those on a country by country basis means that we sometimes come up with bespoke solutions. But I'm confident that certainly the rail industry understands the requirements of cybersecurity. It's a challenge as well, and a lot of the infrastructure and a lot of the rolling stock is, generally aged, long before cybersecurity was ever considered. In fact, long before the concept of digitalization, particularly the train, was ever considered. And so it will come in time. But I don't envisage that we are in a compromised situation or anything like that. I think that with our customers and on a regionalized basis, we are in a good position, and I feel quite happy that ultimately the customers, but also all the assets and the operators are well protected as it stands today.
Yeah, of course. Excellent. Well, okay, that is unfortunately all the time we have for today. Will, thanks ever so much for your time. Great presentation, excellent views and key insights there into the world of Siemens Mobility and the exciting things to come. Of course, challenges around COVID-19, but as you say, we need to move beyond and look forward. So thank you very much for your time. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Been a pleasure.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.